declining test scores, overcrowding, students not meeting grade level benchmarks, bullying, teacher wages, staffing shortages, curriculum issues, indoctrination, and the list goes on, are currently contributing to numerous frustrations with the status quo.
And so begins what will be the biggest debate in this year's legislative session. Republican Senator Nichols, co-chair of the Idaho Freedom Caucus, introduced the Say Voucher education savings account bill today in the Senate Education Committee. They released a sneak peek of the bill a week ago. And while it did have the same routing number today, it was only just printed. So we don't know all the nitty-gritty details of what was brought forward before that committee today. But in this early edition from last week, well, it kind of prompted some questions. Obviously, this topic will be the center of debates and discussions that will last for hours, and they will get into the weeds and cover the line-by-line minutia of whatever is written in this bill. We just don't have that kind of time here on the 208, and it doesn't really make for good TV. But for some answers, which we knew weren't coming from the caucus leadership, we decided to ask the Mountain States Policy Center. They're kind of a fairly new think tank in the area, but they've been advocating for school choice and education savings accounts for a while. And just in time for this year's legislative session, they put together this 20-page handout. Their take: school choice, vouchers, and education savings accounts are a good thing.
We've gotten away from concentrating on the kids. And instead, I think sometimes we concentrate on the adults in the system. Our point of view has always been what's best for the kids in the system. And that sometimes is detrimental to many of the children in the system who need extra help.
How much have you guys looked at this idea?
Oh, I've been studying it for the past 15 years.
And you think it can work in Idaho?
Yes, absolutely. It can work in any state if legislators are committed to it and if the school districts are cooperative with it. I mean, school districts stand to gain from this. I think there's a lot of fear that schools are going to be shut down. There's a lot of groups out there saying education choice means shutting down public schools. It does not mean shutting down public schools. It means making public schools better.
It does mean less money for public schools.
Not necessarily. It depends on the way it's set up.
The way the early edition of this draft is set up, it would take 80% of what the state spends on average per student away from a local public school and put it into an education savings account. That money could be used on anything educational, from tuition at a private school to after-school tutoring.
I mean, it is not just private schooling, it's not just homeschooling, and that's what education choice and an ESA is really all about. I mean, the money does not belong to the school. It belongs to the child's education.
But according to Idaho's Constitution, it shall be the duty of the legislature to establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public, free common schools. Cargill argues that doesn't account for everyone.
If you're one of the 10 to 15% of students in the state right now who are not in the public school system, you're not getting a benefit from the state from that constitutional requirement.
Okay, let's talk about private school kids. History shows in any place that has these ESAs that 60 to 80% are the ones that are enrolling in this and basically subsidizing their private education. That it's not so much people who are jumping out of failing schools and then going to a private school, it's those that are already there. So how is this not just benefiting those kids that are already there?
Well, first of all, I would dispute the number 60 to 80%.
However, that's exactly what Arizona's Department of Education found this past fall, when their ESAs became universal. About 75% of their applicants were never enrolled in any public school prior. Cargill believes that would change over time.
If you're allowing kids or allowing families in certain areas of the state who may not have access to a private school choice option right now.
20 counties in Idaho do not.
Right. If you're one of those families, what we've seen in Florida and a lot of the other states that have done this is that the supply ends up coming in and meeting that demand. And what we've seen in other states is that it increases educational outcomes to a lesser extent, but still there for kids in the public school who stay in the public school as well. So it's a win-win for all of those categories.
How does that work?
So what ends up happening in a lot of the states that do this is you see the school districts improving because they're facing competition now.
Let's talk about accountability. And when it comes to private schools, they are not accountable to anybody. This says that's not going to change. Does that seem like that's the right way to do this?
Well, I would just push back and say they are accountable. They are accountable to the parents. If my son or daughter is not getting the education he or she needs, I'm going to pull them out and send them elsewhere.
You can do that already in Idaho.
Yes, but what you can't do is see a public school that is not performing be shut down. When was the last time you heard about a public school not performing being shut down? And the reason for that is because we keep putting money into a system as opposed to putting money into the kids.
Should we not just account at all and say we don't know what they're doing?
No. And in most other states, what you see with these programs is there are accountability. If you're getting accountability measures, if you're going to take the money, they have to meet accountability standards.
It's not in this one, though. This chapter does not permit any government agency to exercise control or supervision over any non-public school or homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
A qualified school, it continues, shall not be required to alter its creed, practices, admissions policy, or curriculum in order to accept students whose parents pay tuition or fees from a Freedom and Education savings account.
I will say that I don't think this particular bill is going to be the one that gets to the finish line. I think we're going to see a lot of changes, a lot of amendments to it. I would be surprised if there's no accountability measure in there, just because most other states that have had this type of program do have strict accountability measures put in place.
So Mr. Cargill doesn't believe this is the final version we're going to see. It's going to be hashed out along the way, probably for quite some time. It is only January, and this could go all the way to March. And to be sure, we are going to speak to the other side of this discussion tomorrow morning. At least that's the plan. Some people, though, might point out that the biggest hurdle for an education savings account would be using public money to pay for private religious education. Our Constitution even forbids it with what is called the Blaine Amendment, named for a congressman from Maine back in the 1870s. He wanted to make sure public money, taxes, did not benefit religious organizations. Idaho adopted its version of the Blaine Amendment in 1890 along with its constitution. Proponents would point out it's a dead letter since holes were poked in such amendments by the U.S. Supreme Court over the last couple of years. Not calling them unconstitutional, but saying if you're going to allow money for secular private schools, you're going to have to allow money for religious private schools. There's already a push this session to repeal Idaho's Blaine Amendment. Cargill claims if an ESA bill passes in Idaho, in 10 to 15 years, we should see a system where every boat has been raised, public and privates altogether. Adding to that, he pointed out the state helping to pay for families that can't afford it to send their kids to private school would essentially be leveling the playing field a little bit.